Today, we're going to be talking about something a lot of Americans don't realize can happen. Having your U.S. passport canceled or restricted if you're in debt, owe taxes, or fall behind on child support. This is a serious issue, especially for anyone planning international travel, so stick with me as I break down exactly how and why this happens and what you can do to avoid it. Because as an American, you do not want your travel mobility restricted. So let's start with the basics. Can the US government really cancel your passport if you owe money? The short answer is yes. If you have significant debt, especially unpaid taxes or child support, the government has the power to either deny issuing you a passport or in some cases revoke it altogether. This doesn't happen for every type of debt, but it's important to know that the situations where your passport could be at risk, and there are various ways where your passport could be at risk. First, let's talk about taxes. If you owe the IRS a significant amount of back taxes, you could find yourself unable to renew your passport, or worse, have your current passport revoked. The threshold is pretty high. Right now, the IRS defines seriously delinquent tax debt, quote unquote, as owing more than $59,000 in unpaid taxes, including penalties and interest. If you meet that threshold, the IRS can certify your debt to the U.S. State Department, and once that happens, the State Department can take action against your passport. And by the way, $59K really is not that much, especially if you're a 6-7 figure entrepreneur who's paying 6 figures in taxes per year. That could even be as small as an accounting error for some people. So what exactly does the State Department do once they get that certification? Well, they can deny you a new passport if you apply for one. If you're traveling on an existing passport, they can even revoke it. That means you could be stranded overseas or unable to leave the US until you resolve your tax debt. This is serious, and the IRS doesn't take this step lightly, but it's a powerful tool they can use to enforce tax compliance. Now, you might be wondering if there's any way to avoid this if you owe a significant amount of taxes. Fortunately, there are some options. If you're actively working with the IRS to resolve your debt, such as through an installment agreement or an offer in compromise, the IRS won't report your debt to the State Department. The key here is to stay proactive. If you ignore this, it's only going to get worse. If you communicate with the IRS and work on a payment plan, you can avoid the passport issue even if you owe more than $59K. The same goes for cases of bankruptcy. If your debt is being handled through bankruptcy proceedings, you're generally protected from having your passport revoked. Now, let's move on to another major reason your passport could get canceled: owing child support. A lot of people forget about this one. This one catches a lot of people by surprise. If you owe more than $2,500 in child support, the U.S. State Department will deny your passport application or renewal. Only $2.5K. In fact, this is one of the most common reasons people are denied passports in the U.S. to begin with. The threshold is much lower than for taxes, and it applies regardless of where you live, whether you're in the U.S. or abroad. Once you owe more than $2,500, your name is submitted to the Department of Health and Human Resources, which then notifies the State Department. From there, the State Department will refuse to issue you a passport until your child support payments are caught up. This can cause serious issues for people who need to travel for work, family emergencies, or other important reasons. Just like with taxes, though, if you start making arrangements to pay what you owe, you can work towards getting your passport privileges restored. Okay, again, the key is being proactive. And it's crazy because if you had to choose between putting a dent in your back taxes or paying your child support, Well, you're better off paying your child support, so at least you get the Department of Health and Human Resources off your back. One thing to keep in mind is that child support enforcement is taken very seriously across the US, and states share information with the federal government regularly. If you're behind on child support payments, it's important to get in touch with your state's child support enforcement agency and to work out a payment plan before things get to the point where your passport is affected. Debt related to your taxes and child support are two big ones, but what other types of debt? If you owe student loans, credit card debt, or medical bills, can the government still cancel your passport for that? The answer is no, not directly, which should be a relief. Private debts like those aren't something that will result in the US State Department taking your passport. However, if your debt leads to legal issues like court judgments against you, there's a possibility it could impact your ability to travel. But it's not as clear-cut as taxes or child support. Something else to consider is that in certain rare cases, if you're involved in a legal situation where you're barred from leaving the country, your passport also might be restricted. This could happen in criminal cases, ongoing litigation, or situations where you're considered a flight risk. In these cases, it's not about debt specifically, but the court may prevent you from using your passport for international travel. So, what should you do if you're worried about losing your passport over debt? The most important thing is to stay informed. If you owe back taxes or child support, don't ignore it. Those debts aren't going to go away on their own, and the longer you wait, the worse the consequences can get. Reach out to the IRS or your state's child support agency and try to set up a payment plan. Even if you can't pay off the debt in full right away, showing that you're making an effort to resolve it can keep your passport from being canceled. Also, if you've already had your passport restricted because of unpaid taxes or child support, you'll need to take action to get it reinstated. For tax debt, this usually means working with the IRS to get the debt under control. For child support, you'll need to contact the appropriate agency and make arrangements to pay down what you owe. Once you've made enough progress, the government will lift the restriction on your passport. But it's not an automatic process. You still need to be proactive about resolving the issue. In conclusion, yes, the US government can cancel your passport if you owe significant debt, especially when it comes to taxes or child support. It's a serious issue that can affect your ability to travel and live your life. So it's important to stay on top of these debts and work with the agencies involved to avoid these consequences. If you're ever in doubt about whether your passport is at risk, don't hesitate to reach out to a tax professional or legal expert to help guide you through the process. And of course, you can book a call with MyLatinLife if you want to learn more about this and how to internationalize, because actually one of the best solutions is to have multiple passports. This is yet another reason why every American adult should have a second passport. And by second passport, I really mean a second citizenship, a second nationality, so that you have a second travel document unrelated to the US government. Because if the US government can really take away your passport just for owing $2,500 in child support, that should be concerning to you. Really, that should be concerning to any entrepreneur who even pays more than $59K in taxes per year or who has kids. So everyone should have a second passport. Obviously, there are many paths to getting a second passport. You could buy one outright. You could get one via marriage. You could work towards a passport via naturalization. You could look at getting one via descent from ancestry. Maybe you have Irish or Italian ancestors. So there are lots of ways that you can work towards a second passport. And if that's something you want to do, highly recommend reaching out to us at MyLatinLife, booking a call with us, and we can put a strategy in place for you to get a second passport in your hands from some other country so that your travel restriction is not limited. And you might be thinking, well, even if I had a second passport, won't the US just not let me leave through the airport? Because don't I kind of need my US passport to leave through the airport? Yes, that might be true. But you could actually, and this is not legal advice or anything, but I just want to open your mind to ideas here. What you could do is you could actually leave through Mexico. So the border with Mexico at San Diego and in Texas and other locations, they just let Americans in, and there's actually no passport control in a lot of situations. So this is obviously not legal advice, but if the U.S. didn't let you leave for whatever reason, just leave through Mexico, and then once you're in Mexico, leave Mexico with your other passport, something like that, right? So long story short, if there's a will, there's a way, and you're going to want more options. You're going to want more travel and mobility. And we like to say that 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So that goes for passports as well. If you have 1 passport, you really have 0 passports. So 2 is 1 and 1 is none, and that applies to passports as well. So let's get you a plan in place to get a second passport. That's it for today's video. If you found this information helpful, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content about taxes, travel, and second passports. And I'm curious, have you or someone you know experienced passport issues because of unpaid debt? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.